Hello, this is reporter Julie Spencer, and I'd like to welcome you to Newsline Iowa City. Please join me today as we take a trip to the Macbride Raptor Project located at the Macbride Nature Recreation Area outside of Solon. Education Director Phil Cronin will answer questions about the Raptor Project and take us on a tour of the facility.
Macbride Raptor Project is a nonprofit organization that takes care of sick and injured birds of prey. So we see 150 to 160 injured birds of prey throughout a year. Those birds first come to us at the Kirkwood Community College in Cedar Rapids, where our clinic is. And so we take care of the birds up there. And then any of the birds that are able to be rehabilitated come down here in the Solon area to the Macbride Raptor Center, and that's where we do our rehab. Once we've rehabbed the birds, we get them released out into the wild if that's at all possible. And then we also have out at the center our permanently injured birds that you can come out and view the live birds in cages. Bird of prey or a raptor are birds that hunt for their own food. They catch and kill their food with their strong, sharp talons, and they have a curved beak to help tear their food apart. And some of the raptors that we would see in Iowa would be bald eagles, lots of different hawks, red-tailed hawks, broad-winged hawks, Swainson's hawks, falcons, peregrine falcons, American kestrels. We're seeing osprey, and then lots of different owls. We always try to make sure people are aware of what a raptor is, because that's kind of our specialty. So, like I said, we start at the Kirkwood Center where we do our clinic, try to get all the birds stabilized and back to where they can start rehabilitation. And then we come down here to our flight cage, which is where the rehabilitation actually happens. This cage is 100 feet long. There's a hallway that's wide open with a perch on each end for the birds to fly. And on the back side of this cage are 6 smaller cages that the birds can stay in overnight. And a volunteer comes out every day and works with those birds, flying them back and forth to get all of their muscles strong again so that they can get released back out into the wild. Once we come past our flight cage, we have 16 cages with live birds of prey that are permanently injured. And so each of these birds have a different injury that have brought them here. This is the rough-legged hawk. Rough-legged hawks are more of a northern species, but they do migrate down in the winter to look for food. This hawk had a wing injury where the wing was amputated. It's also getting older. It's been here since 1990, so it's almost 20 years old, 19 years old. And so it's starting to develop something like cataracts in the eyes, so it's starting to have some vision issues also. So this is a great horned owl. This one lost its left eye, and so that's going to affect how they can hunt and how they can be aware of their predators and things like that. Even though owls' primary sense is their hearing, their eyesight still is very important to them. It would be too hard for this bird to survive in the wild with just the one eye. The great horned owls are probably our most common owl in Iowa. We see quite a few of those every year. A lot of people think the feathers on top of the head are ears, but those are not the ears. Those are just feathers. The birds do kind of use those to communicate. They'll put them back when they're agitated. They'll flare them up if they're trying to attract a mate. So it is a way for them to communicate, but it's not for hearing at all. Okay, now we're at our barred owl. This barred owl we've had since 2003. They're also a very common owl. These are very vocal. You hear them a lot at night. And right now she's actually doing a couple of things that are defensive. She's clicking her beak, which is to let us know that she's a tough bird and that we shouldn't mess with her. And she's puffing out her feathers to make it look like she's really big. Most people, when they see these right after we see like the great horned owl that we saw, they think that this bird's bigger or as big as the great horned owl, but the great horned owl weighs close to 4 pounds, where this bird only weighs 1 pound and 12 ounces. So the size difference is pretty amazing, and by people being confused by that, it shows that puffing out those feathers is an effective defense. It does make their predators think that maybe it's a bigger animal than it should try to go after, and so that allows it a chance to get away or to scare away its predator. This bird was found tangled in a barbed wire fence. When its wing was torn, we were able to suture it back up or stitch it back up, and everything healed pretty well. The problem is that the scar tissue heals a little tightly, and so the wing won't stretch completely out, and so that affects the flight. It also affects that silent flight, and so it's going to be a deterrent for this bird to survive out in the wild.
How long has this bird been here?
This one came to us in 2003.
Now, is this one of the only birds that clicks, or do they all do that?
It's probably one of the birds that are quicker to click. Some of the other owls will do it. Normally, like the great horned owls will hiss a little bit, kind of like a cat does, but the barred owl is pretty quick to click its beak. Well, this is a red morph eastern screech owl. Screech owls are another common owl. They're just much more secretive because they're so small. They weigh around 6 ounces, so they're not even half a pound. They're much more active at night when it's dark, and it's a little safer for them to be out. Obviously, they have a lot more predators than the great horned owls or barred owls would, so they're a little more careful. It's called red morphed or red phased because of the red coloring on it. There's also a gray morph that really doesn't tell you anything about age or sex. It's just colored variations, just like we have different colored skin or hair, and they've actually found red and gray morphs in the same nest, so it's not necessarily even a regional thing.
So this particular bird likes to hide a lot.
Yeah, this bird would nest in tree cavities deep in the woods, and then as it got darker, it would come out and it would hunt for small mammals, small birds, insects, things like that, small reptiles. This bird came to us in 2008. It was already an adult, so there's not really a way for us to tell ages of most of the birds.
Why do you keep most of the birds alone in the cages?
Normally they would, unless they were mating, they would, not a lot of them are stay in colonies or anything. Some of the birds get very territorial. We do have a couple of birds where we have 2 in the same cage, and whenever we do that, we make sure that we can spend lots and lots of time making sure that those birds are going to get along all right. All the birds have different temperaments, and so even birds of the same species don't always get along, and so we really kind of watch that to make sure that there's not going to be an issue. And since we can't be here 24 hours a day, we want to make sure that if those birds are going to be together, that they're going to actually get along together and not have a fight or some kind of problem where, one bird's being dominated all the time. So this is the rough-legged hawk, and this bird has a wing injury where part of the wing's been amputated. It's a dark-phased version of one of the earlier birds that we had seen, which was a light-phased rough-legged hawk. The rough-legged hawks get their name because they have feathers on their legs down to their feet, but not including their feet, and that's an adaptation that helps them to stay warm in the winter. They're a northern bird, and so we do see them in Iowa. When the food sources start getting scarce, they'll start to migrate down this way, and then they'll look for their food sources in Iowa. Probably half of the birds that we see are injured by cars, so we see a lot of wing injuries and a lot of head trauma. The color difference is strictly feather coloration. It has nothing to do with if it's a male or female. It doesn't have anything to do with the age of the bird. Most of the raptors are, the females are 10% larger than the males, and so that's the way to really tell the males and the females apart. We do have a couple of species, like the American kestrel, that the female would have brown wings and the male would have blue wings. So that species you can see the difference in color, but primarily in the raptors it's size. So this is the turkey vulture. The turkey vulture is, I think it's one of our most interesting birds. They have some kind of quirky things that they do for their survival. This is also an imprinted bird, so just like the owl that we talked about, it's human imprinted, so it tends to go towards people for food and shelter and things like that. Not something you'd want to take care of in your house. They have some pretty odd ways of of surviving and protecting themselves. But more importantly, it's still against the law. They are migrating species, and so it is against the law to take these birds into your home. One of the things that's kind of unique for them is that when they feel threatened, they vomit on you. So you can imagine they're eating dead food, and then it's in their stomach, and then they get scared and they throw that up. And so it's a very offensive odor. It's very effective for keeping predators away. Another one of the interesting things that the turkey vultures do is they go to the bathroom right on their legs and feet, and that way when they're in a hot climate, any little breeze, because when they go to the bathroom it all comes through the same vent or the same area, so everything's a liquid. It gets liquid on their legs, a little breeze comes through and it helps to cool them off. And then you can also see the bald head and the big open nasal cavity. That's all because this bird, the way it eats, it drives its head into the body of its food, so it tears open a hole and sticks its entire head in and just starts eating all the stuff on the inside. And so this way when it pulls its head back out, it doesn't have all of those feathers collecting all of the innards or the inside of its food, so it stays a little cleaner that way. And also with that big nostril opening, it can clean out that area so that it doesn't have anything get lodged in there to impact its breathing. This is our golden eagle. The golden eagle we've had here since 1988, so it's 21 years old. It was hit by a car or a truck and broke its back and hip, and so it is one of our larger birds. It's a 12-pound bird, so obviously it needs to be as healthy as it can to support that weight when it's hunting and soaring. The golden eagle gets its name by the golden feathers on the nape of the neck and also on the shoulders. And so you can see that in the light it really gives a nice golden reflection, and that's where it got its name. They also have feathers on their legs because they are northern species. So again, this is an adaptation they've developed to help them to keep a little warmer. Alright, this is our bald eagle. We've had this bird since 1989. The bald eagle is another one of the birds that we can tell the age a little bit by the head and tail feathers. They come in when the bird's about 5 years old. Once it's an adult, we don't really have any way to identify the age necessarily, but when it's young we can kind of see by how the feathers are changing and the head and tail feathers coming in. We can get a good idea of how many years old it is up until that 5-year point when it has the full white head and tail feathers. This bird was injured, part of its wing was injured, just the tip had to be amputated, so it would be kind of like removing your fingers, and so it again affects how the bird can soar and hunt and do all of the traveling that it needs to do to survive in the wild. This is our peregrine falcon, and this is the fastest animal in the world. They can dive at speeds almost 250 miles an hour. They have a hunting technique that's kind of unique. It's called thunking, and what happens is the bird goes into its dive. As it's going after another bird, it will ball up its feet and thunk the prey in the head and either knock the bird unconscious or kill the bird in midair, which allows it to then swoop down and, while still in midair, catch its prey without having to have any kind of struggle. So it's a pretty effective way of hunting, and it also keeps the bird from having to have that fight in midair where it could get injured. Unfortunately, this bird was being released in an area that another falcon already had territory in, and they got into a fight, and that's how this bird got injured. The wrist of the bird was broken, and as you're looking at the bird right now, the wrist is actually what we would think of as a shoulder, but as the bird stretches its wing out, it would be a different area on the wing, and so that's the part of the wing that's injured is called the wrist. We are glad that we had the opportunity to talk to everybody about our project. We're open whenever the Macbride Nature Recreation Area is open. You're welcome to come down and take a tour of the center and see all of our live birds. There are information on all the cages, and we appreciate anybody coming out and enjoying our Raptor Center.